The ground shook beneath my boots as a bulldozer roared across my farmland, 2,000 acres of family soil tearing through a fence line like it was paper. I sprinted forward, waving my arms, shouting at the crew to stop. And there she was, standing smugly on the hood of her shiny SUV, sunglasses perched on her nose, clipboard in hand. Karen, our HOA president. With a smirk, she shouted over the engines, "This land doesn't belong to you anymore. I sold it this morning. Consider it progress." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Generations of sweat, blood, and history were being carved up in front of me like yesterday's trash, and the woman responsible was smiling like she'd just won the lottery. Karen thought she had crushed me. She thought she had buried my family under her phony signatures and illegal deals. But she didn't know the truth. Every member of my family carries a federal badge, and she had just declared war on the wrong people. I stood there in the churned-up dirt, my boots sinking into the earth. My grandfather once plowed with his bare hands, staring at the orange monstrosity of a bulldozer chewing through my fence. The driver pretended not to see me, though I could tell from the twitch in his shoulders that he knew what he was doing was wrong. But why would he stop? Karen was standing on her SUV, barking orders like some self-appointed general, and nobody in the neighborhood had ever dared to question her authority. "Shut it down," I shouted, my voice carrying over the grind of the machine. The foreman, a nervous man in a neon vest, glanced toward Karen. She waved her clipboard like it was a royal decree. "Keep going, he doesn't own this anymore." "We have contracts," she snapped, her tone sharp enough to slice through the roar of the engine. My fists clenched. Contracts. My family's deed sat in my safe, papers older than Karen's entire HOA, signed and notarized decades ago. I stormed toward her SUV, dust rising around me in angry clouds. "Karen, what the hell is this?" She smiled down at me, tilting her sunglasses, just enough for me to see the gleam in her eyes, the gleam of someone who believed she was untouchable. "Oh, don't act surprised," she cooed. "The HOA board voted to repurpose your land. 2,000 acres just sitting there. It's wasteful. I found developers who actually know how to use it." I couldn't help but laugh, though it wasn't out of humor. It was disbelief, the kind of laugh you let out when someone tells you the sky is green. "Repurpose? You sold my land." Without me even knowing, Karen hopped down from the hood of her SUV, landing neatly in her heels on the gravel. She walked up close, lowering her voice as though she were letting me in on a great secret. "Listen, dear. The contracts are already signed. Money's already in the account. By the time you fight this in court, the development will be halfway done. Face it, you lost." Her perfume hit me in the face like a slap, expensive, overpowering, the scent of arrogance. "Your HOA doesn't own a damn inch of this farmland," I said, biting off each word. "This is private property, family property." Karen smirked. "Not anymore. It's HOA zone now. You should really read the community bylaws." I wanted to rip that clipboard from her manicured hands, but I didn't. Instead, I looked her straight in the eyes and smiled, slow measured the way a man smiles when he knows something the other person doesn't. Karen mistook it for defeat. "Good boy," she said, patting my arm like I was some misbehaving dog. "Don't make this harder than it has to be." I let her walk away toward her entourage, 3 board members, 2 developers in suits, and a cameraman she'd clearly hired to document her little victory. My neighbors stood at the edge of the road, whispering, taking pictures on their phones. Some pitied me. Others looked thrilled, like they were watching an episode of their favorite reality show. But inside, I wasn't broken. I was boiling. Because in that moment, Karen didn't realize she hadn't just tangled with a farmer, she'd tangled with a family network that stretched across the federal government like roots of an oak tree. I watched as the bulldozer pushed another section of the fence timber, snapping like bones. I inhaled deeply, the dust clogging my throat, and forced myself to step back. Losing my temper here would give Karen the spectacle she wanted. Instead, I pulled out my phone and dialed. "It's starting," I said when my brother answered. Already his voice crackled through the line. "She sold the land. Claims the HOA voted it through. Bulldozers are here." A pause. Then steady as stone. "Okay. Don't fight her today. We'll come tonight. All of us." I hung up and slid the phone back into my pocket. The air seemed clearer already. Karen strutted back toward me, her developers clapping like she'd just won a trophy. She raised her voice so the neighbors could hear. "You see, this is what progress looks like. Out with the old, in with the new. No more wasted land, no more eyesores. Luxury estates, shopping plazas, maybe even a golf course. Our property values will skyrocket." Cheers from her board. Mutters of doubt from the crowd. I crossed my arms. "You think money can buy everything, don't you?" Karen flicked her hair over her shoulder. "It usually does." I leaned in slightly. "Then you better hope your bank account is big enough to pay off federal prison time." Her smile faltered just a fraction, then returned twice as wide. "Oh, please, don't be dramatic." "Dramatic?" I almost laughed again. If she only knew what was coming. As the bulldozers idled, Karen signaled her cameraman to start rolling. She posed in front of my land like she'd conquered new territory. "This is the future of our community," she declared into the lens. Stronger, wealthier, more valuable than ever before. I turned and walked back toward my farmhouse. Let her have her little show. Let her soak up the attention. Every step I took across that dusty path was a promise she had just signed her own downfall. Because that night, the farmhouse kitchen would glow with the light of a dozen federal badges spread out on the table, and Karen's empire, built on lies and forged signatures, was about to crumble under the weight of the law itself. That evening, the old farmhouse glowed like a lantern on the hill. Its windows had seen decades of storms, celebrations, and grief, but tonight they would bear witness to something different, a war council. I pushed open the heavy oak door, the hinges creaking the way they always had, and was greeted by the hum of voices. My family was already gathering around the long wooden table, the same table where my grandfather once laid out seed maps, where my father kept his hunting rifle cleaned and ready now, was covered with laptops, stacks of files, and steaming mugs of coffee. My brother Daniel looked up first. Tall, broad-shouldered, his FBI badge sitting beside his mug like a paperweight. "So it's true," he said, his voice, a mixture of disbelief and fury. "She really bulldozed the fence." "She didn't just bulldoze," I replied, dropping into the chair at the head of the table. "She announced to the whole neighborhood that she sold the land, 2,000 acres, claims the HOA rezoned it. My cousin Sarah sharp-eyed every inch. The IRS investigator she was slammed her palm against the table. Rezoned. That's not even legal. HOAs can't touch agricultural land. It's outside their jurisdiction entirely." "She doesn't care about legal," I said. "She cares about power, and the fact that nobody ever calls her bluff. She thinks she can bluff her way through this too." My Aunt Lydia leaned forward. She had retired from Homeland Security, but you'd never know it from the way her posture carried authority. "So what's the play here? You want to drag her into civil court? That'll take years. By then, the developers will have poured concrete over half the property." I shook my head. "Court won't be fast enough. We need to dig into her operation now. Every cent, every forged signature, every deal she's made. Expose it before the first foundation is laid." Daniel nodded slowly. "Then we treat this like what it is: organized crime. We split tasks, collect intel, and build the case from the inside out." The room buzzed as everyone shifted gears. Coffee cups were drained. Laptops flipped open. It was like watching a machine spring to life, except this machine was my family. Sarah tapped quickly on her keyboard. "I'll start pulling her financials. HOA funds, bank transfers, tax filings. If she laundered the money, I'll find it." Daniel pulled out his phone. "I'll run her developer buddies through federal databases. See who's been flagged before. Wouldn't surprise me if these guys have skeletons stacked in their closets." Aunt Lydia leaned back, eyes narrowing in thought. "And I'll check zoning permits through Homeland. If she's forged them or used stolen credentials, that's federal territory. Even my younger cousin Mark, fresh out of training with ATF, was eager. I'll set up surveillance. Cameras, drones. If she's moving money or meeting these guys in backlots, we'll catch it." I looked around the table, feeling a swell of pride. Most families argue about holiday dinners or who forgot to water the plants. Mine coordinated federal takedowns over pie and coffee. Still, the weight of it pressed on me. "This isn't just about catching her," I said quietly. "This is about our land. This is about Grandpa's legacy. If she thinks she can erase generations of work with one fake contract, she's dead wrong. But I don't want us rushing into this blind. She's cunning. Arrogant, yes, but cunning." Silence fell for a beat. Then Sarah looked up, her eyes fierce. "Arrogance is the easiest weakness to exploit." I leaned back, letting her words sink in. She was right. Karen's ego was her Achilles heel. She needed to flaunt, to boast, to show the world that she was in control. That would be her undoing. Daniel leaned forward, folding his hands. "We bait her. Let her think she's got you cornered. Let her brag. The more she shows off, the more rope she gives us to hang her with. Bait her how I asked." He smirked. "You just keep showing up. Don't fight her too hard yet. Play the dumb farmer. Pretend you're scared outmatched. Let her think she's winning. Meanwhile, we'll be pulling every thread until the whole web collapses." The plan settled over the room like a blanket. It was dangerous, yes, but it was the only way. As the night deepened, we mapped it all out: who would handle surveillance, who would file the quiet requests for warrants, who would track the money. The farmhouse table was covered with a tangle of sticky notes and scribbled diagrams. I glanced toward the window out at the dark fields stretching far beyond the glass. The moonlight bathed the land in silver, peaceful, unknowing of the battle raging around it. I made a silent vow, then no matter what it took, I would defend these acres. They were more than dirt. They were memory, bloodline, and promise. By midnight, everyone had their roles. Mark packed up his drone gear. Sarah shoved a folder of preliminary bank statements into her bag. Daniel slipped his badge back into his pocket. Lydia pressed her hand on mine as she stood to leave. "You're not alone in this," she said firmly. "Remember that. She's not fighting one man. She's fighting an army." I nodded, though the knot in my chest didn't loosen. Because while my family had power and connections, Karen had something dangerous too: no shame. And people with no shame will burn the world around them before they admit defeat. As the last of the headlights faded down the gravel road, I stood alone in the farmhouse kitchen, the silence settling heavy. I poured one last cup of coffee, staring at the scattered papers on the table. Somewhere out there, Karen was already planning her next move, probably sipping champagne with those developers, laughing about the dumb farmer who didn't know he'd lost everything. I smiled grimly, raising the mug in a silent toast to the night. She thought she was unstoppable. But tomorrow the hunt would begin. The next morning I woke to the sound of gravel crunching under tires. My dog Ranger barked furiously from the porch hackles raised. I stepped outside with my coffee still in hand, and sure enough, Karen was marching up my driveway like she owned the place. Clipboard tucked under one arm, a smug little smile plastered across her face. Behind her trailed two burly security guards in black polo shirts, and a couple of HOA board members carrying manila folders like props in some amateur stage play. She didn't even pause to admire the sunrise spilling across the fields. She stopped dead center in my yard heels, sinking into the dirt, and pointed her pen at me like it was a weapon. "You," she barked, "you're trespassing." I almost choked on my coffee. "Excuse me," Karen adjusted her sunglasses as if I had been the one who'd lost touch with reality. "This land is no longer yours. We have documentation, and you refusing to vacate makes you a trespasser on HOA property. I am within my rights to issue fines and press charges." Her guards crossed their arms, puffing up their chests like cartoon characters. I leaned against the porch post, sipping my coffee slowly, letting the silence drag. Finally, I raised an eyebrow. "Karen, I was born on this land. I took my first steps out here. And you're telling me I'm trespassing on my own farm?" She flipped open her clipboard with exaggerated flair. "Yes. Section 12B of the HOA bylaws states that property reallocated for community development falls under HOA jurisdiction. That means your so-called farmland belongs to us now. You are not only trespassing, you are obstructing progress." The audacity of it almost made me laugh. She spoke about my land, the soil my grandfather died, plowing as if it were a public swimming pool she was upgrading. One of the board members, a thin man with a nervous twitch, piped up, "The board has voted unanimously to support President Matthews's decision." I smirked. "Of course you did. I bet she was holding the pen while you signed too." Karen's face tightened, but she quickly regained her composure. "Mock me all you want, but the wheels are already in motion. The developers are committed. The community is excited. You, my friend, are the only holdout. And frankly, you're embarrassing yourself." "Funny," I said, setting my mug on the porch rail. "I thought you were embarrassing yourself, screaming at a man who actually owns the land you're standing on." Her smile flickered, but she pushed forward, her voice rising. "Don't play games with me. I've dealt with stubborn fools before, and they always regret it. I will bury you in fines, lawsuits, and court dates until you can't breathe. Do you understand me?" I stepped down from the porch, closing the distance, until I was standing only a few feet from her. The guards stiffened, but I didn't so much as glance at them. I looked straight into Karen's eyes, calm as still water. "You're welcome to try," I said quietly. "But let me give you some advice. Before you threaten to bury a man, you should probably know what tools he's got in the shed." She blinked, confusion flashing across her face for just a moment. Then she sneered, mistaking my calm for weakness. "Is that supposed to scare me?" I smiled thinly. "Not at all. Just a friendly reminder that you don't know me half as well as you think you do." The tension hung thick in the air. My dog growled low, the guards shifted uneasily, and the board members fidgeted like kids caught cheating on a test. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Karen broke the silence with a loud laugh. "This is rich. You really think you can outsmart me, honey? I run this neighborhood. I run this HOA. And soon enough, I'll run every acre of this land. You're just in the way." She spun on her heel and started walking back toward her SUV, shouting over her shoulder, "Enjoy your coffee while you can, because next time I'll have the sheriff with me, and he doesn't sip his mornings away." The entourage followed her fumbling papers, muttering under their breath. The guards gave me one last look, a mixture of pity and discomfort before climbing into the SUV. The convoy pulled out of my driveway, leaving a cloud of dust in its wake. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the tire tracks scarring the gravel. Neighbors had gathered along the road watching like it was a free show. Some whispered, some shook their heads. One older man gave me a look of sympathy and mouthed, "Good luck." I nodded back, but inside I wasn't shaken. If anything, I was more certain than ever. Karen thought her clipboard made her queen. She thought her board signatures were swords and shields. She thought her security detail made her untouchable. But soon she would learn the truth. I pulled out my phone, dialing Daniel again. "She came here this morning," I said flatly. "Tried to accuse me of trespassing on my own land." His chuckle on the other end was humorless. "She's digging her own grave." "She's moving fast," I warned. "We need to move faster." "Then tonight we start pulling threads," he said. "Every signature, every zoning permit, every cent in her accounts. We're not just going to stop her, we're going to peel her entire empire apart piece by piece." I hung up and slid the phone back into my pocket. The sun had climbed higher now, burning away the morning mist. My fields stretched wide and golden before me, silent witnesses to the war brewing on their soil. Karen thought she'd seen me rattled. She thought she'd seen me cornered. But she hadn't seen me yet. Not really. Because the farmer she tried to bury wasn't just a farmer. He was a son, a brother, a cousin, and part of a family with the full weight of federal law behind them. And soon she would find out exactly what that meant. That night, the farmhouse kitchen didn't look like a kitchen at all. The table was buried under laptops, scanners, maps, and binders. Coffee pots lined the counter like soldiers on standby. My family had slipped into their second skin, the one they didn't advertise at neighborhood barbecues. Daniel was at the head of the table, FBI badge glinting under the light. His voice was calm, clipped the way it always got when he was in full agent mode. "We need to start with the money. Follow the cash, and we'll follow the rot." Sarah, my IRS cousin, cracked her knuckles and opened her laptop. "Already on it. HOA accounts are public to members technically. I logged in through the portal with your access, and, oh boy." Her eyes widened as lines of numbers filled the screen. "This is filthier than a barn stall." She turned the laptop toward us. "Look here, monthly dues from homeowners. Standard. But then, transfers. Tens of thousands flowing out to an LLC nobody's ever heard of. Same LLC paying developers. And guess who the registered agent is?" We all leaned in. She clicked once. A name popped up in bold. "Karen Matthews," Sarah said flatly. The room buzzed with mutters. I shook my head, trying not to explode. "She's funneling HOA money into her own pocket." "More than that," Sarah added, scrolling further. "She's skimming off the land deal, too. The sale of your property." She deposited a 7-figure check into the same LLC account. Daniel scribbled notes. "Money laundering, wire fraud, easy federal hooks." My Aunt Lydia, leaning back with arms crossed, spoke next. "Let's check the permits. If she's passing this off as rezoning, she'd need county or federal clearance. And my gut says those papers are forged." She slid a folder across the table. Inside were copies of zoning documents Karen had flaunted earlier in the week, stamped, signed, official-looking. Lydia pulled out a magnifying glass from her purse and laid it over the signature. "See this," she tapped the bottom line. "The zoning commissioner's signature. It's fake. Wrong slant, wrong stroke pressure, amateur forgery." Amateur Daniel echoed with a bitter laugh. "Yet bold enough to bulldoze a fence with it." Mark, my younger cousin, was setting up a bank of monitors, drone footage flickering across them. "You'll like this," he said, queuing up a clip. The screen showed Karen in a dimly lit parking lot, shaking hands with a developer, an envelope bulging in his fist. She slid it into her purse like she was picking up groceries. "Clear as day," Mark said. "Cash bribes." I felt my jaw tighten. There was something surreal about watching your nightmare unfold in real time, like seeing proof that the monster under the bed had teeth. But Daniel wasn't smiling. He leaned forward, steepling his fingers. "We need more. Bribery, laundering, forgery, it's strong. But we need her arrogance to hang her with." "She already gave us that," I said. "She filmed herself in front of the bulldozers, declaring the land hers. She loves the camera, she loves the crowd. That's how we get her." Sarah nodded slowly. "Public humiliation tied to federal charges. She won't know whether to scream or faint." We worked in silence for a while after that, the farmhouse alive, with the hum of electronics. Pages, flipped keyboards, clicked printers spat out reams of evidence. It felt less like a family meeting and more like a covert command center. Every so often someone would mutter a discovery. She paid for landscaping at her own house using HOA funds. She doctored board meeting minutes. "Look, the dates don't line up." her son's college tuition, straight out of the HOA maintenance budget. Each revelation stacked like bricks, building the case higher and higher until it towered over us. But beneath the satisfaction of gathering proof, I felt a deeper fury growing. This wasn't just about my land anymore. She was robbing everyone. Every neighbor who scraped together their dues each month. Every retiree who trusted the HOA to keep their streets safe. She wasn't just corrupt, she was a parasite. At midnight, Daniel called us back to order. "We've got enough to move forward," he said, eyes sweeping the room. "But timing is key. If we strike too soon, she'll wriggle out. We need her to commit on camera in public." Which means I said we let her dig deeper. Sarah looked uneasy. "That's risky. The developers could break ground any day now." I took a long sip of coffee, then set the mug down hard enough to rattle the table. Let them. A few broken fences are nothing compared to watching Karen fall from her throne in front of the entire neighborhood. The room went quiet. Everyone understood. This wasn't just strategy, it was personal. Finally, Lydia spoke. "Then we keep her talking, keep her bragging, keep her thinking she's winning. Pride will make her sloppy. Pride will make her loud. And when she's loud enough, we'll be there with cameras rolling and warrants ready." Daniel tapped the table. "We've got surveillance. We've got financials. Next step is infiltration. Someone needs to attend her meetings, record her speeches, catch her boasting in front of the board." They all looked at me. Of course, Karen already thought she had me beaten. She loved nothing more than watching me squirm. If I showed up at her meetings, she'd put on a show just for me, and that show would give us everything we needed. I smiled grimly. "Fine. I'll be her audience. But when the curtain falls, she won't know what hit her." Outside, the wind howled across the fields, rattling the old windows. It sounded almost like the land itself was restless, waiting for justice. I closed my notebook, stood and looked out at the dark horizon. My family's farmland stretched far into the night, unseen but unforgotten. Karen thought she had stolen it. But soon she would learn you can't steal what's protected by blood, by history, and by a family of agents who knew exactly how to take down a thief in pearls and heels. The next week, my quiet farmland turned into a circus. I woke to the sound of engines, not the usual tractors or pickup trucks, but heavy-duty construction vehicles rolling down the dirt road in a neat convoy. Bulldozers, backhoes, cement mixers, bright banners hung from the sides of shiny new trucks, future site of Willow Creek Estates, luxury living for the modern family. I stood at the edge of my porch, coffee mug in hand, Ranger growling at my side, and there she was. Karen, dressed in a scarlet power suit that practically screamed queen bee, striding across my pasture as though she had already planted her flag. At her side were the developers' men in slick suits, hair too shiny shoes that had never once touched real dirt. They moved like they were filming a commercial, and in fact, they almost were. A camera crew set up near a podium draped with a white cloth. Rows of folding chairs dotted the field. Local reporters unloaded gear from vans. Balloons swayed in the breeze, and a big gold shovel leaned against a mound of freshly turned soil. Karen waved her arms grandly as neighbors gathered along the fence line. "Welcome, everyone," she shouted, her voice amplified by a portable mic clipped to her blazer. "This is the beginning of a brighter, wealthier future for our community." Applause trickled awkwardly from the board members. Some neighbors clapped politely, others just folded their arms, whispering. The older ones looked downright furious. I walked forward slowly, leaning on the fence post like I had all the time in the world. Karen spotted me instantly. Her smile widened like a shark's. "Ah, and here he is," she said into the microphone, beckoning toward me. "Our local farmer who has generously stepped aside, so progress can finally take root." The crowd turned to look. Some frowned in sympathy, others smirked like they were enjoying a free show. I raised my voice calm and steady. "I didn't step aside, Karen. You pushed in." Gasps from a few neighbors. Karen's smile tightened, but she smoothed it out quickly, turning back to her audience. "Ignore his dramatics, folks. Some people cling to the past, but we are building the future." She motioned for the developers to step up. One of them, a tall man with slicked back hair, cleared his throat. "Willow Creek Estates will feature luxury homes, a state-of-the-art shopping plaza, and even a golf course. Property values will skyrocket." Another developer chimed in. "This farmland was sitting idle, producing nothing. With our vision, it will produce prosperity." I laughed loudly, drawing every eye. "Idle. This land has fed families for generations. It's produced wheat, corn, cattle, real prosperity. You want to pave it over for a strip mall." A ripple of murmurs rolled through the crowd. Karen snapped. Silence. You're trespassing at an official HOA event. I leaned on the fence, grinning. Funny. Last I checked, this was still my land. Or are you planning to build that mall on a lie? Karen's face flushed crimson. She stormed toward me, heels stabbing into the soil. Enough. The contracts are signed, the land is sold, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. This is the HOA's proudest moment. The camera crew zoomed in, capturing every word. Exactly what we wanted. Behind her, my cousins mingled with the crowd, discreetly filming with their phones. Daniel pretended to chat with a neighbor while slipping a recorder closer to the podium. Sarah stood near the reporters, handing out background documents that conveniently pointed to Karen's fake LLC. Lydia took notes in a leather pad, looking every bit the professional she used to be. Karen strutted back to the podium, puffing up like a victorious general. She raised the golden shovel high above her head. Let this groundbreaking ceremony mark the dawn of a new era. Applause burst from the board members. The developers clapped too, a little too eagerly, but the rest of the crowd was divided. I could see the doubt in their eyes. They didn't trust her. Not really. Karen jammed the shovel into the mound of dirt, tossing the first clump into the air. Cameras flashed, balloons bobbed. She posed proudly with the developers, shouting, "Together we are unstoppable." That's when I stepped forward, climbing onto the fence rail so my voice carried. "Unstoppable," I called out. "You forged signatures. You laundered money. You pocketed HOA dues for your personal vacations. You sold land that doesn't even belong to you." The crowd erupted in gasps. Karen whirled on me, face twisted. "Lies. Every word is a lie." I shrugged casually. "Funny. We've got receipts, bank statements, even video of you taking cash in a parking lot. Should I play it now or wait until the sheriff arrives?" Panic flickered across her face, but she quickly masked it, laughing into the mic. "He's delusional, just a bitter man who can't accept progress." But the murmurs in the crowd told a different story. Neighbors whispered, trading uneasy looks. The developers shifted uncomfortably, glancing at each other. Karen tried to rally, holding the mic tight. "Ignore him. This is our future, and no one will stand in the way, except federal law," I cut in. For the first time, her voice faltered. The ceremony staggered on after that, but the damage was done. The crowd left unsettled. The developers huddled in whispered conversations. Karen snapped at her board members, her smile slipping entirely once the cameras shut off. I walked back toward the farmhouse ranger, trotting at my side, dust swirling in the fading light. Every step I took felt heavier with purpose. Karen had thrown her party, basked in her glory, but beneath the balloons and speeches the cracks were showing, and soon those cracks would split wide open. Because the next phase wasn't about evidence anymore. It was about setting the trap and letting Karen walk straight into it. The night after the so-called groundbreaking, our farmhouse living room turned into a surveillance hub. Wires stretched across the floor, cameras hummed on charging stations, and my cousin Mark was hunched over a bank of monitors, fingers flying across a keyboard. It looked less like a home and more like the control room of a small FBI field office. "This is it," Daniel said, dropping a file onto the table. "She's cocky now. After today's stunt, she'll be sloppier than ever. That's when we move." He pulled out a printed schedule, highlighting times in neon yellow. "Karen's got a board meeting tomorrow night at the community hall. The developers will be there. She'll be bragging, maybe even showing off the money. We need eyes and ears inside." Sarah leaned forward, smirking. "Good thing the IRS loves paper trails. I've already traced her LLC transfers to an offshore account. If she talks about it tomorrow, we'll have the missing link." Mark tapped a key, and a grainy video popped up on the screen. Karen, in that same parking lot, accepting another fat envelope from a developer. She was laughing, tossing her hair, her arrogance practically dripping from the pixels. "Clear as day," Mark said. "But we need audio too, something irrefutable." I exhaled slowly. "Then I'll bait her. She can't resist showing me up in front of an audience. She'll run her mouth. We'll be ready." The plan was set. The following evening, I walked into the community hall under flickering fluorescent lights. The place smelled of old carpet and burned coffee, the kind of setting where HOA egos thrived. The board sat at the front on a raised platform with Karen in the center like a queen on her throne. She spotted me instantly, and her lips curled into a triumphant grin. "Well, well, look who decided to crawl in." Hoping to apologize, farmer boy, I gave her a slow smile. Not exactly. The neighbors in the audience shifted uncomfortably. Some whispered, others leaned in, sensing drama. And right on cue, my family was already in position. Daniel sat in the back row, his phone angled just so. Sarah pretended to take notes like a secretary, her recorder hidden under the clipboard. Mark had installed a micro camera in the ceiling vent the night before. And Lydia lingered near the doorway, intercepting anyone who tried to slip out early. Karen tapped the mic, the sound screeching across the hall. Tonight we celebrate progress. The developers are here, contracts signed, money secured. This HOA has never been stronger. The board clapped obediently. The developers gave half-hearted nods. I stood up slowly from the audience. Funny, you should mention money, Karen. How much of it ended up in your offshore account? Gasps erupted. Heads turned. The developers stiffened. Karen froze for a fraction of a second before bursting into laughter. Offshore account? Oh, please. He's delusional. This man can't accept that his farm is gone, so now he's making up conspiracy theories. But her voice cracked on the word delusional. I stepped closer to the podium, keeping my tone calm. So you deny pocketing HOA dues. You deny taking envelopes of cash in parking lots. The room buzzed with whispers. Karen slammed her hand on the table. This is slander, and I will see you in court for it. Daniel's phone caught every word. Sarah's recorder captured the tremor in her voice. Mark's camera zoomed in on the beads of sweat forming at her temple. Then came the moment we'd been waiting for. Karen leaned forward, hissing into the mic, as though the whole room weren't listening. Do you think I care? I run this HOA. I control this board. I can sell whatever I want whenever I want, and no one can stop me. The crowd erupted. Some gasped. Some shouted. Even the developers looked alarmed, shifting in their seats. I tilted my head, smiling. Thank you, Karen. That's exactly what I needed to hear. For the first time, I saw panic flash across her face. She knew she had just given us her confession, and she had handed it to us on a silver platter. Back at the farmhouse later that night, the mood was electric. We replayed the recording over and over, her words echoing through the speakers. I can sell whatever I want whenever I want. That's it, Daniel said, slapping the table. That's abuse of power, extortion, racketeering. With the financials and the video evidence, we can lock this down. Sarah was already drafting a report. IRS will eat her alive. Fraud, tax evasion, money laundering. She's cooked. Lydia added, and Homeland will want a word about those forged zoning permits. Mark leaned back, grinning. So when do we drop the hammer? Daniel's eyes met mine. At the next full HOA assembly. We want the whole neighborhood there. Public humiliation. No escape. I nodded slowly, picturing the look on Karen's face when her little empire collapsed. She wanted an audience. We'd give her one. But this time she wouldn't be the star, she'd be the example. Outside, the night was still and quiet, the farmland stretching endless under the moonlight. But in my gut, I could already hear the roar of justice coming down. Karen thought she had me beaten. She thought her clipboard and her board gave her invincibility. But she'd just confessed her crimes into a microphone in front of half the town with federal agents recording every second. Her kingdom of lies was teetering. And soon it would come crashing down in a way she could never have imagined. The night of the full HOA assembly, the community hall was packed tighter than I'd ever seen it. Folding chairs scraped against the floor, neighbors fanned themselves with meeting agendas, and the low murmur of gossip filled the air like static. Everyone knew this meeting was different. The developers were present, sharp suits gleaming under fluorescent lights. The local press had squeezed into the back rows. Even the sheriff had shown up, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, trying to look neutral. And then there was Karen. She strutted into the room in a navy blue suit jacket with gold buttons, pearls swinging at her throat. Her clipboard was tucked under her arm like a royal scepter. She beamed at the crowd, waving like she was campaigning for office. Welcome, everyone, she declared into the microphone, her voice echoing through the hall. Tonight marks another milestone for our beloved community. Our development project is underway, and thanks to my leadership, we are headed toward a brighter, wealthier future. The board members clapped dutifully. A few neighbors joined in, though half the room sat stiff and silent. I sat near the middle row, arms crossed, letting her bask in the moment. My family was scattered across the room in plain sight. Daniel leaned against the back wall, Sarah near the press table, Lydia by the entrance, Mark fiddling with a laptop on his knees. We were ready. Karen raised her chin eyes, locking onto me. And as for certain individuals spreading lies about me tonight, we will set the record straight once and for all. Murmurs rippled. Heads turned toward me. I stood slowly, the wooden chair scraping loudly against the floor. That's a fine idea, Karen. Let's set the record straight. Her smile widened, but it was brittle around the edges. Go ahead, she said sweetly. Tell everyone your wild conspiracy theories. I walked down the aisle, every step deliberate. All right, neighbors. Here's the truth. Karen didn't just mismanage funds. She created a fake company, funneled your dues into it, then pocketed the cash. She sold off land she had no right to touch. And just last week, she admitted on tape that she can sell whatever she wants whenever she wants. Gasps exploded across the hall. The developers shifted uncomfortably, glancing at one another. The sheriff straightened. Karen barked a laugh, her pearls rattling with the force of it. Audio-video, you're bluffing. If you had anything real, you'd have shown it already. That was my cue, Daniel, I said softly. My brother stepped forward, raising his phone. He tapped the screen, and Karen's voice filled the hall, loud and unmistakable. I can sell whatever I want, whenever I want, and no one can stop me. The room erupted. Shouts, gasps. One old woman clutched her chest like she'd been slapped. The developers cursed under their breath. Karen lunged forward. That's fake, edited. Don't believe it. Sarah rose calmly from her seat, holding a stack of papers. Funny. Because here are your bank records, Karen. Transfers from the HOA account into your private LLC. That's embezzlement. And here she flipped to another page: tuition payments for your son's college paid from HOA landscaping funds. I wonder how your neighbors feel about covering that bill. More shouting from the crowd. Someone yelled, "You stole from us." Another shouted, "I want my money back." Karen's face turned crimson. This is a smear campaign. Lies and slander. That's when Lydia stepped forward, her voice slicing through the noise. Not slander. Federal evidence. She reached into her coat and pulled out a folder, laying it on the board's table. Forged zoning permits. Fake signatures from county officials. Do you know the penalty for that? Karen stammered. You can't just. Mark interrupted from the side, his laptop hooked into the projector. The screen behind the board flickered to life, showing grainy surveillance footage of Karen stuffing an envelope of cash into her purse. The date and timestamp glowed in the corner. The hall fell silent, dead silent. Karen's knees buckled. She gripped the podium for balance. This is entrapment. You can't. This is illegal. I stepped closer, standing just feet from her now. Illegal, I said, my voice calm, steady. Let's talk about illegal. Forgery, bribery, money laundering, extortion. You didn't just steal land, Karen. You stole trust from every person in this room. I turned to the crowd, my voice rising. She wanted me to look like a trespasser on my own farm. She wanted all of you to think she was untouchable. But here's the truth. Daniel stepped forward, flipping open his jacket to reveal his FBI badge. She's not untouchable. The room gasped again. Sarah set down her IRS credentials on the table with a sharp smack. She's not invisible. Lydia held up her Homeland Security ID. She's not above the law. And then Mark, the youngest, flashed his ATF badge with a grin. She's not even that clever. The crowd went wild. Neighbors shouted, some cheered, others demanded refunds and justice. The developers backed toward the door, whispering frantically. Karen shook her head violently, hair whipping. No, this is a setup. They're not real. They can't all be. But the sheriff was already moving forward, cuffs in hand, eyes hard. Ma'am, I think it's time you came with me. Karen shrieked, lunging for her clipboard as though it were a shield. Papers fluttered everywhere. I am the HOA president. You can't do this to me. I own this community. I leaned close just enough so only she could hear. Not anymore. As the sheriff clicked the cuffs onto her wrists, the camera flashes lit up the hall. Karen screamed, struggling, but it was useless. Her reign was over. The neighbors who once feared her now shouted over one another, demanding her resignation, demanding justice. The board members shrank in their seats, pale and sweating. And me, I stood in the center of it all, calm as stone, watching the empire of the woman who had bulldozed my fence collapse into rubble. The clink of handcuffs around Karen's wrists echoed louder than her screams. She thrashed in the sheriff's grip, pearls snapping and scattering across the floor like marbles. Neighbors gasped and shoved closer, cell phones raised to record every humiliating second. Unhand me, do you know who I am? She shrieked, spittle flying. I run this neighborhood. The sheriff's jaw tightened. Not anymore, ma'am. He nodded toward my brother Daniel. Feds will be taking it from here. Daniel stepped forward, badge gleaming. Sarah, Lydia, and Mark followed, their credentials flashing like a wall of iron. Karen's eyes darted between them, panic settling in where arrogance had once lived. You set me up, she stammered, her voice breaking. You can't all be federal agents. That's impossible. I walked closer, my boots echoing against the tile floor. Impossible. Karen, the only impossible thing here is the idea that you thought you could rob 2,000 acres of land and get away with it. The crowd roared, cheers, jeers, demands. One neighbor shouted, "Where's our money, Karen?" Another yelled, "You'll pay for stealing from us." The developers edged toward the exit, whispering frantically into their phones. Their perfect suits now looked like costumes from a failed play. One of them tried to smooth his tie, but the sweat running down his face gave him away. "Don't think you're walking free either," Sarah called out, her voice sharp. "Every payment you made to Karen's fake LLC is logged. Wire fraud, conspiracy, bribery, you're in this just as deep." The taller developer cursed under his breath. The other tugged at his collar, pale as chalk. We were told it was legal," he muttered weakly. "Tell it to the judge," Daniel said. Karen lunged forward, dragging the sheriff with her. "No, they promised me," they said. "Save it," Lydia snapped. "Your promises are as fake as those zoning permits." The room erupted again. Reporters shouted over the crowd, cameras flashing, microphones shoved forward. "Mrs. Matthews, did you steal millions in HOA funds? Did you bribe developers? How long has this been going on?" Karen screeched, her voice cracking. "I am the victim here. I." But her words were drowned out by the sound of the sheriff dragging her toward the doors. Neighbors surged forward, booing, hurling accusations. Some even clapped. It was chaos, but it was also justice. And then just like that, the doors slammed shut behind her. The HOA queen bee was gone, carried out like a criminal, which she was. The silence that followed was strange, almost heavy. For the first time in years, the board sat frozen without Karen's voice, dictating their every move. The head of the developers cleared his throat, voice trembling. "Given, recent revelations, we will be terminating our involvement with Willow Creek Estates immediately." A ripple of relief washed over the crowd. One old farmer in the back spat on the floor. "Good riddance." The developers bolted, leaving behind their glossy brochures and golden shovels. All eyes turned back to the HOA board. Without Karen, they looked like lost children. One of them, a balding man with trembling hands, stood and tried to speak. We didn't know. She told us everything was legal." "Save it," a neighbor snapped. "You signed every paper she shoved in front of you. You let her rob us blind." Voices rose again. Calls for resignations, refunds, audits. The board members, cornered by the weight of their own cowardice, wilted under the fury. One by one, they stammered out resignations, muttering apologies nobody wanted to hear. By the time the meeting ended, the HOA had collapsed into ruins. Its leaders were disgraced, its queen arrested, its developers fled. And me, I stepped out into the cool night air, the stars spread wide above the farmland. The soil smelled rich and damp, freshly scarred by bulldozers, but still alive, still mine. Ranger bounded ahead, barking happily, as though he knew the land was safe again. Neighbors gathered around me as we walked back toward the farmhouse. Some clapped me on the shoulder, offering thanks. Others apologized for ever doubting me. One elderly woman wiped tears from her cheeks. "Your grandfather would be proud," she whispered. I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat unexpected. "He's the reason I fought," I said quietly. Behind me, the community hall buzzed with reporters filing stories. Tomorrow headlines would scream, "HOA president arrested in federal corruption scandal." By next week, Karen's name would be synonymous with greed and downfall. But for me, it wasn't about the headlines. It was about standing on the soil my family had worked for generations and knowing it was safe. Knowing Karen's bulldozers had failed. I paused at the fence line, staring at the broken posts and the churned-up earth. Soon we'd rebuild, stronger than before. Karen thought she could bury us with lies. Instead, she'd buried herself. And the land, our land, was still here. Waiting, watching, eternal. The days after Karen's arrest felt like the first breath after a long storm. The air was clearer, lighter, and the ever-present tension that had hung over our neighborhood seemed to dissolve like morning mist. The farmhouse became a gathering place again, not for war councils, but for community. Neighbors brought over pies, casseroles, and fresh bread, the old-fashioned way folks say thank you when words fall short. Some of them admitted they'd once believed Karen's lies. Others confessed they'd been too afraid to speak up. But all of them stood on my porch with the same message: "We're glad you fought back." I walked the fields each morning, boots sinking into soft soil, Ranger bounding ahead with his tail wagging like a flag of victory. The fences were broken, yes, the grass scarred by bulldozer tracks, but the land itself was alive. Stronger than Karen's greed, stronger than the lies she built her empire on. One morning I stopped by the fence line where the golden shovel had struck its fake groundbreaking. The dirt mound still sat there, but weeds were already sprouting through it, reclaiming what was always theirs. I knelt, dug my hand into the soil, and let the dirt run through my fingers. This wasn't just land, it was bloodline, memory, and future all at once. Inside, my family gathered at the kitchen table again, but this time the air was light with laughter. Daniel leaned back in his chair, sipping coffee. Well, the FBI office sure enjoyed that little package of evidence. Karen's looking at years in federal prison. Sarah grinned, tapping her laptop. And the IRS has already flagged her accounts. She'll be paying back every cent she stole, plus penalties. Not that she'll have much left by the time we're through. Lydia chuckled. Homeland's thrilled, too. Fake zoning permits. That's a federal felony with a capital F. She may be swapping her pearls for an orange jumpsuit. Mark leaned forward eagerly. And ATF's got their eye on the developers. Turns out one of them has ties to some shady overseas groups. Karen picked her partners poorly. We all laughed, the sound filling the kitchen like music. It wasn't gloating, not exactly. It was relief. Vindication. The weight of months of scheming, planning, and holding back finally lifting off our shoulders. I looked around at them, my family, my team, and felt a surge of pride. Karen had underestimated us, thought we were just an ordinary farm family. But what she didn't understand was that ordinary families can be extraordinary when they stand together. That weekend, the community held a gathering at the town square. No HOA banners, no speeches from Karen, no phony promises, just neighbors standing together. Someone set up a grill, kids ran with ice cream cones, and an old fiddle played from the back of a pickup truck. People laughed again. People breathed again. When I stepped up to speak, the crowd quieted. My heart thudded heavy in my chest, not from nerves, but from the weight of everything we'd been through. This land, I said, voice carrying across the square, isn't just soil and fences. It's legacy. It's trust. And when someone tries to steal that from you, you can't stay silent. You stand. You fight. You protect what's yours, not just for yourself, but for everyone who came before you and everyone who comes after. The crowd applauded, some even wiping tears. I looked out at them, neighbors who had once been divided by fear, now bound together by truth. Karen thought she could build an empire on lies. But lies crumble. Truth stands. Always. Cheers erupted. For the first time, I felt not just like a man defending his land, but like a part of something bigger, a community worth fighting for. Later that night, I sat on the farmhouse porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The sky burned orange and gold, the field stretching out like a sea of fire. Ranger curled at my feet, tail thumping softly. I thought of Grandpa, of Dad, of all the generations who had walked this land before me. They'd faced storms, droughts, and hard years. I'd faced something different, a storm made of greed and arrogance. But in the end, we'd survived the same way they had, by standing firm. I took a long breath, the smell of fresh earth filling my lungs, and whispered, "We're still here." The land didn't answer, but it didn't need to. Its silence was strength enough. At the end of the day, this wasn't just a story about a greedy HOA president or a crooked land deal. It was a lesson about family, about standing up, about never letting fear or arrogance steal what matters most. Karen thought she could bulldoze over history, over bloodline, over truth itself. But what she never understood is that truth doesn't break that easily. It might bend under pressure, it might hide for a while, but it always rises back up. Just like weeds through concrete, just like dawn after the longest night. And here's the part I want you, the listener, to take with you. Sometimes we face battles that seem impossible, bullies with clipboards, bosses who abuse power, systems that look rigged against us. But the moment you stand, the moment you refuse to be silenced, you change the game. And if you have people beside you, family, friends, community, you're stronger than you realize. So don't let anyone tell you you're powerless. Don't let anyone sell what doesn't belong to them, whether it's your land, your dignity, or your future. Fight back. Stand tall. And remember, arrogance collapses, but integrity endures. If this story struck a chord with you, drop a comment below, tell me where you're watching from, and if you've ever had to face down a bully like Karen. And don't forget to subscribe for more HOA stories that prove one thing in the end: justice always wins.